Great. So, hi, I am here with Mark
Hello.
Facundo, and he is a
Hello.
Crown Prosecutor for the government of Alberta. Thank you for doing this,
I
Mark.
am. You're very welcome, Heather. Miss Davidson.
Either is fine. Thank you.
Okay.
So, we're going to ask you some questions, Mark, about your job. So, when I first met you, you were actually studying neuroscience, and
I was studying neuroscience, yeah.
and I thought you'd be a really interesting person to interview because I know a lot of students think that they have to know in grade 12 what it is that they want to do, and they have to pick their university courses according to that path. But I know, for instance, you didn't start out in law, right? So how
Right.
did you get into this job? How did you get into this field?
First of all, I don't even know what I want to do now. So for those of you who don't, that's totally fine. And it'd be kind of weird if you did know what you want to do. I think you maybe have an idea of what sounds interesting and what sounds fun. For me, I think probably in high school, I did speech and debate. I think I just randomly took it as an option, and I found I really liked it, and I wasn't great at it, but I liked that. And my family, my dad's dad was a lawyer in the Philippines, a defense lawyer, and his dad was a lawyer at the old Spanish court in the Philippines. But for my dad, we would be 4 generations of lawyers. That didn't really play a part into it. So my dad ruled the whole streak. He's just some engineer. But I also liked sciences as well, and that was and I thought I was going to be a doctor or a scientist generally, maybe an astronaut. None of those worked out.
So lawyer by default is what you're saying.
Kinda, and also in law there really isn't. For those of you who think about going to law, I hear a lot of people saying they want to do like a criminology degree or something relating to law. Just take what you find interesting, because I think there really isn't any required courses, at least at the U of A when I went. There isn't any required credit in any type of course, unlike, say, medicine. So just take what you want to take. And if you like it, you'll probably do better at it than you would otherwise. And then those grades will help you get into law school. So I knew that I thought neuroscience was interesting. I liked science. So
Steve
I took that.
Contact the guidance office, Steve Maurer, please contact guidance.
I think that's you. And I remember in the 3rd year of my undergrad, I was deciding what to do. I decided I didn't want to be a doctor. I actually was considering being an optometrist or a lawyer. And this is by no means how you should choose a career, but the test to get into optometry school was the OATs, the OATs. And I didn't want to tell people I was studying for the OATs. That was why I decided.
That's how you found your destiny.
Yeah.
It really like the sound of LSAT.
It was okay. It was better than OATs.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, what are you studying? Oh, the OAT. And then I have to explain what that is. So I thought, I'll just be a lawyer.
So what does your actual job look like? Because Crown Prosecutor, I think we have a lot of conceptions from the media.
Right.
But what does your work actually look like as a Crown Prosecutor now that you're in this field?
So I'm a provincial prosecutor, which means that I prosecute on behalf of the Crown all offenses in the criminal code, mostly some traffic offenses, from shoplifting to murder. That's different than, say, a federal prosecutor like my wife, Milena. They do mostly the drug offenses, which is a separate statute, the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. But yeah, basically, pretty much most of the criminal code is prosecuted by Crown prosecutors. And my particular area, it's for those of you who are probably unfamiliar with Alberta geography, Fort Saskatchewan is a small town just outside of Edmonton, which is, for those of you who don't know, a city north of Calgary. And as a rural prosecutor, we do a lot of the smaller towns around, and it's actually probably busier, I would say, or it feels busier than an Edmonton-based practice, just because we cover a lot more ground, and the courts aren't as frequent. So there's a lot of files concentrated on a single day. So that's what I do generally.
And how much of that would you say is actually in the courtroom, and how much would be hours working on a case?
I would say my courtroom, I'm in court maybe 2 or 3 times a week, all day, except if I have a bigger case in, say, Court of Queen's Bench, which is the higher level of court, where I'd be in court for, I think my longest was 2 weeks in court. But I mean, it's as opposed to other types of law, criminal law, you're going to be in court a lot. So if you want to be in court, and I did, I can't think of another type of law that would, where you'd be in court as much as a criminal lawyer, whether you're a prosecutor or defense.
So what would you say is the most challenging thing about the job and the work that you do?
I think it's easy to forget as a prosecutor. The system we have set up, it's not like you see on TV, especially American shows, where people are yelling at each other, and it's actually a lot more subdued, but it's still an oppositional system. I mean, there's an accused on one side and a crown on the other. So I think some crowns and some defense lawyers as well, they sort of relish in that adversarial aspect of it. And as a crown, you have to be careful that ethically speaking, we're not in it to win it. We're not to seek a conviction. I think a lot of people, that's a misconception among the public and probably among some crowns, that your goal is not to seek a conviction. So I think the challenge is to remember that we're dealing with people's lives. When I'm asking somebody to be sent to jail for 4 years, that's not something I do lightly. And I think it can be easy to just worry about numbers and negotiate sentences like they're just an abstract number. But these are real months and real years of a person's life. And I don't think, I sometimes have to do that. It should be a last resort to send someone to prison. But I think that's the biggest challenge for me is that weighs on me a little bit, I think. And it makes it hard for a prosecutor, where I think there's a misconception where you should always be going for jail, always be going for the highest amount of jail, where I don't. And it's whenever I see someone go out the side door, that to me means that all other avenues have failed. And it's having done this both as defense lawyer and as a crown for 10 years, geez. To me, jail does really only one thing of benefit. It doesn't deter people. It definitely doesn't rehabilitate people. When required, it takes someone out of the population for a little bit for the protection of the population. That's the only thing it does. And I think there are lots of different avenues that are more effective at reducing crime than throwing someone in jail. So that's a bit of a longer rant, but yeah, that's the most challenging aspect, I think, for me.
That's a really valid perspective, especially in this world as we're becoming more critically conscious and aware of the things that what justice actually means and what justice requires, yes. Right? So what's most rewarding about your job? Why do you do it? Why do you like it?
I think it's my crim law professor. He was also a practitioner, Alex Pringle. He's actually probably one of the best lawyers in the country. At the time he's passed away, but he said that crim law is stressful but never boring. And so it's every file I have it always is fascinating and interesting, and even, you know, shoplifting, there's always a different aspect to it, and it's you know, and I don't I guess I don't really talk about details of files, but basically, you know, every file is I can't put it down. So I think I actually have some late onset, or maybe I've had it the whole time, ADHD, and I know people throw that around a lot, but I actually talked to a doctor about it. It's like, yeah, you're kind of borderline. But I think that explained a lot about how in school, how I would procrastinate, and I started actually working for a big corporate law firm. I hated it, and I think I just couldn't hold my attention. And I know it sounds a bit childish, I suppose, but like when I don't want to do something, I can't do it. So criminal files, it's high volume. I can look at a file and close a file literally in seconds sometimes. If it's I can look at it and see it's not worth prosecuting, and that sort of constant stimulation, I think, is what I need for the job, and being able to finish a lot of tasks, and that sense of accomplishment. Whereas other types of law, where, you know, you have the same file for a year, the same facts, so that would drive me insane. So I think that's why.
I love that you connect that, though, because I think ADHD is something that a lot of people struggle with, and there's a lot of misconceptions, and like so many learning challenges, we often look at them as only barriers, as opposed to strengths or areas of focus that can actually give you, you know, not necessarily a leg up, but a better perspective on things, or a better ability. You know, that sometimes these things that we look at as disabilities are abilities in different areas. And I think that
right.
It could really inspire students, right?
Right, and I'm sure there's some of your students who now, you know, would procrastinate, and you know, every essay I ever had, every paper was a last minute night before. I mean, you probably remember this from undergrad. And, you know, I was always told that I was lazy, or, and I kind of just absorbed that. But I think as a result, my procrastination forced me to I studied for an entire, don't recommend this, but I studied for an entire course in like a day. But now in my profession, someone can dump a QB trial, a Queen's Bench trial the day before and say, I'm so sorry for the late notice, just run this, and I'll be fine with it. Like that doesn't give me anxiety, because I probably would be in a similar situation if I had it 2 months before. So, and
all of these coping strategies that are now really benefits to your job, right?
Yeah. So, and I guess that's another thing is, you know, in this job or any job, just know your strengths and know where you excel and use it to your advantage.
So we already kind of talked about how you didn't start out in law, but is you know, is this something you always wanted to do? Or, I mean, there's so many different areas of law, right? You talked about how you were a defense lawyer and now you're a prosecutor. So did you kind of have any interesting or funny detours along the way into this career?
Well, the only, I worked during school at lens crafters. That's probably the only other real job. I had a couple of government jobs, but I remember.
Desire to be the optician, the optometrist?
I never put that together. Yeah, I mean, that was an obvious link, but I never realized.
That's what this is for.
My God, that makes sense. Huh. Yeah, and that was fun. I guess it technically a retail job, but I also, again, the ADHD, I was like, this is too, just standing around for 8 hours asking people to, it was torture for me. So I got like cross-trained in the lab to make the glasses. I would like sell glasses and say, I'll make these for you in about an hour, man. Put on my lab coat, But that was the only real other detour, I guess, if it counts as a detour. I mean, I've basically just stayed in university except for a year off, and did that during the summertime. But in law, yeah, I knew I liked criminal law. The idea of what a lawyer is was someone arguing in court. That was just what I thought a lawyer was, and I knew in law school I loved criminal law. I did student legal services, so I actually had experience in court. Then I thought, maybe I'll enjoy other types of law. So I articled with a big corporate law firm in Calgary. Hated it very much.
What does that mean to article exactly? What is that?
Right. Sorry. So after law school, you have to article for a year before you get called to the bar. And when you get called to the bar, that's when you become a lawyer. So they used to have bar exams. Now you do classes during your articling period. So you basically work with a law firm or a lawyer.
Like an intern.
It's a practice. Yeah. And so a highly coveted article was with a big national law firm. And it's unfortunate for those of you who are thinking about going to law school, is that they train you early on, like 2 months into your first year of law. They say, you gotta, if you want an article in this big firms, you have to get a summer job there. To get a summer job there, you have to start applying like October of your first year, which you don't know what you want, what type of law you want to do. So you're already diverged to that. And for the most part, again, this is just my own personal experience. I don't mean to denigrate anybody whose parents work at a law firm, but there's I think a lot of unhappy lawyers. It's a lot of work, and you get paid accordingly. And that if you want to make a lot of money, that's probably where you want to do it. But that never really interested me. It was not the type of law I wanted to do. And I finished articling and I had like kind of an existential crisis. I remember because it was always, finish high school, get to university, finish university, get to law school, and then get an article, get called to the bar. And then I remember getting called to the bar and then thinking, okay, what's next? What's the next step I have to do? And then I was like, oh, I just have to stay here and become partner maybe in 7 years. And that was like, I don't want this. This is not, I just stopped and realized I didn't want to be where I ended up. So I quit and started criminal defense. And yeah, that was it for me. I loved it very much. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. There isn't, in my mind, much difference between criminal defense and Crown, even though I get it's the opposite. But it's the same area of law. I also happen to be a terrible businessman. So, and as a defense lawyer, you have to hustle, you have to get retainers, you have to be able to ask for thousands of dollars without shame. I'm not saying they should feel shame, but I could never, I was never good at that. Neither was my grandfather, as it turns out. I remember he would accept payment from his clients with like chicken eggs, and my grandmother would, and I would do similar things.
There's a novel in that story, I bet.
Yeah, I bet there is.
Right?
Yeah. And
so what advice do you have then you've talked a lot about your journey and kind of how you figured out your path in law. Again, I think law is such a fascinating profession because it's one of those ones that, when you ask that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like everybody knows what a lawyer is, whereas, when we were growing up, not everybody knew what a YouTuber was. So it is like
right.
Established profession, but it's also one I think there's so many misconceptions from the media and it just seems so big, right? So how do you figure out that path?
One, we don't make as much money as everyone thinks we make. If your goal is to make a bunch of money. It probably shouldn't be, but if that is, then law is there are easier ways to make money, and sure, the top of any profession, they'll be making a lot of money, but particularly for a government lawyer such as myself, we make a perfectly decent and comfortable living, but so if that's your main purpose in being a lawyer, that's there are better ways. But I would just say that like I said before, know your own strengths and don't fall into the trap of letting other people tell you what you want your career to be, if that makes sense. So in law school, when they tell you, no, you want to work for these big firms, they have the interesting files, that might be the case for some people. That certainly wasn't for me. But know yourself and know what you like. And if you don't know that, that's fine as well. I would recommend trying different types of areas of law. And being okay with moving around. I mean, a lot of my friends, not just move firms, but tried different areas of law. And a lot of people feel the same way about criminal law that I feel about corporate or, for example, family law. I could never, even watching a family proceeding in court, it just makes me so uncomfortable with the emotions. I could never do it, and people feel the same way about criminal law. They say they could never do criminal law. So it all depends on your personality, but just make sure that you make that decision for yourself rather than letting people unduly influence that.
Yeah, such great advice for law, but for really any profession, right? Trusting yourself and not going based on other people's perceptions of where you should go.
Right. For example, when I said I wanted to be a doctor, that wasn't me talking, that was my dad talking. So,
which I think so many students grow up with. I know when I told my mom I wanted to study English, she said, "Don't do that. You need to, get a more profitable, stable job." And my mom was an English teacher, So I think there's things in this society that we value, and sometimes it's security, and sometimes it's financial. But you spend so much of your life at work, right? So that idea. Caring about what you do, which you obviously do the way you talk about law, is obviously a huge factor in success and happiness, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You gotta like what you do. That's what I told my daughter, is that just do something, whatever you do, just like what you do and make sure it helps people. It's the only stipulation, is what I told her.
Great advice. Thank you so much for doing this, Mark.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Good luck, everyone.